Hello, everyone. Welcome to the first of our new working group LTS meetings. My name is Jeremy, and I'll run as host today. I will drop the agenda such as it is in the chat. Not a whole lot on it because we're just getting started, but I can use it as a good starting point. All right. Muted myself somehow. Figured we could go ahead and do maybe just a quick round of intros. A few people on here that I know, a few people on here that I don't know. And then we can kind of dive into figuring out what we want to do with this working group. We have a charter that was approved and had a lot of input from a lot of folks and contains some high-level goals about what we want to accomplish with the working group. So I thought it would be good to start there, kind of dive into what we want to do as the first part of this, and then maybe discuss how we want to track work going forward, perhaps creating a GitHub project board, and then in subsequent meetings, we can follow along that and check in on status and make sure we're pushing some things forward. So with that in mind, I will go ahead and start intros. My name is Jeremy. I am a chair for SIG Release. I work at Microsoft in the Azure org. I've been doing Kubernetes for a while in various different things. And I'll turn it over to Jordan.
Hey everyone, I'm Jordan Liggett, also been around for a while. I work a lot on the API review side, SIG architecture, a lot of stuff like that. Really interested in compatibility and sustainability. So I was around for the last iteration of the LTS working group and pushed a lot on some of the dependency stuff, like how we stay on supported Go versions, how we get some of those stories straight. So we're in much better shape now than we were 2 years ago, which is fantastic. So yeah, excited to make it easier for people, customers and vendors, to keep this thing supported and going.
I'm Micah Hausler. I'm on the Kubernetes Security Response Committee. I work at AWS on EKS, primarily on security. I talk with a lot of people about Kubernetes upgrades and what they want out of this. So I'm very excited to see this group getting restarted up.
Got to pick somebody.
Oh, okay. We'll go with Bridget.
Hi, I'm Bridget. I work with Jeremy at Azure. I'm also a co-chair of SIG Cloud Provider, done a bunch of stuff with SIG Network, and I am very interested in making this easier for the end users who simply can't upgrade every few months because they have businesses to run. So I will pass it to Vince.
Me, there's two of us. Hi everyone.
There are two of you.
I'm Vince. I'm chair for Skiplevel Lifecycle. I'm representing both that and Red Hat and the Cluster API community as well. Like I've said, the use cases are very common for Cluster API specifically. Like we've seen a lot of churn, like about upgrades and issues, and like so we're just interested like to collaborate more with all of you folks. I joined a little late. I guess like I'll pass it to the other Vin.
Yeah. So I'm Vince Power. I'm not on any other Kubernetes things, so I'm not as cool as everybody else here. I work at Dell in an internal Kubernetes group. So long-term sustainability is a big deal. So I thought I'd see what I can help out with this organization to see if we can get things moving forward.
End users are very cool.
And Arnav, I'll pass it to you.
Hi everyone, I'm Arnold Matsudato. I work with Micah and EKS, and I'm here just to make sure that we can deliver the best thing for our end users. Thank you. Next, Nick.
Howdy, everyone. I managed to rejoin on cell since my service provider decided that midnight was a good time to kick off maintenance. As you can hear, I'm from Australia. I work for Isovalent, and I was previously a chair of the WG-LTS in its previous incarnation. Yeah, for those of you who are end users, I also was an end user when I first started with LTS as well. So thank you. Have we done everybody? I don't know who's been because I missed it.
Nope.
Someone else might have for me.
Go with Noah.
Okay, Noah, you're up.
Hi, I'm Noah Abrahams. I am a TPM at Oracle. Mostly I spend my day working with contributors, but in previous incarnations, I have done quite a bit in regulated industries. And you will hear that as my rallying cry through most of the conversations we have here. I will pass it over to Rita.
Hey everyone, I'm Rita. I'm a dev on Azure. I'm a chair for SecAuth and SRC. I'm really happy to be here to make sure we make life easier for the end users. I'll pass it to Han.
Hi, yeah, I'm Han. I am a software engineer at Google. I work with Jordan. Yeah, I'm just eager to understand, the mechanistics behind LTS and how it's going to work. Yes, has Josh gone?
I haven't, unless there's another Josh. Yeah, so my name is Josh Dupney. I'm an advocate here at Microsoft, and I'm just here to learn. I've been involved in the previous incarnations, just been an end user of Kubernetes. I worked at Stack previously where we spun up AKS, and so I've really just been an end user and here to learn and grow. So yeah, let's see if I can find someone who hasn't gone. Scott, how about you?
Sure. First time using Zoom in a while, so hopefully my mic's working. Can you hear me? All right, sweet. So I'm from Red Hat, work on OpenShift, haven't done a whole lot of stuff upstream Kubernetes community, but I spent a lot of time working on topics around lifecycle and how we can keep our customers upgrading, fitting into something that we can support, and trying to, I think someone mentioned customers can't generally upgrade every few months. That's the big thing that we're running into, is how do we fit into that? So interested in participating in this. Bawana, you're up.
Sure.
I haven't seen.
Can you hear me?
Yep.
Hello, everyone. My name is Bhavna. I am an end user. I provide a Kubernetes platform for our internal customers. I did participate in the 1.25 release team, and I was interested in this working group because, yeah, it is a pain point as an end user where we are not able to keep up with the releases. So happy to participate in the Kubernetes community again. Thank you.
How about we pass it to Joe?
Okay. Hello, this is Johan from Huawei, Sweden. Here, we are the user of Kubernetes, and we are very interested in the long-term support topic. So hope to collaborate on this area.
How about Caroline? Okay, how about Nicola?
Hi, folks. Can you hear me? I had issues with audio earlier.
Yep.
Oh, cool. Yeah, I'm Nicola. I'm working at Giants Forum as a platform engineer. Giants Forum is providing Kubernetes as a service. So we have our managed Kubernetes that we run for our customers on multiple cloud providers as well as on-premise. So lately we have been rethinking our release model in general. And one of the topics that popped up was Kubernetes LTS, long-term support in general, from our point of view. So this working group being revived seemed like very well timing and like a great opportunity to learn more about Kubernetes long-term support in general, and hopefully try to help out here and come to a better place when it comes to long-term support in the future. Thanks.
All right, Jyoti, you want to go next?
Thank you. My name is Jody. I work in EKS on the cluster provisioning aspects, and I'm here to have fun. Of course, work with everyone on this interesting problem.
Okay, I've been trying to keep a list. I think we're down to Peter and Dan, and Paco said he was at the hospital. Did I miss anybody else?
Hey, sorry, can you hear me now?
Yep, we can hear you now.
Okay, cool. I'm Caroline. I'm the project manager for our K2 and K3S distros in SUSE. We're super interested in this group. I'm honestly here to be a fly on the wall. I'm not super technical, but I am here to see what our team can do to contribute because it's sort of early for them. So I'm here as a representative.
Awesome, thanks. All right, Angelos, you go since I missed you.
Yep, no, it's fine. Hi all, I am Angelos Kolaitis. I'm based in Greece and I'm working as an engineer in Canonical. I'm basically interested working on the microcase distribution. So again, we have quite a few customers asking for LTS and it's also very important for us. So very eager to help in this in the best way that we can and see where this LTS can go. That's it for me. Thanks all, very nice seeing familiar faces from Amsterdam.
All right, Peter.
Hi, my name is Peter Reifel. I'm an engineer at Datadog. We're an end user of Kubernetes. We run a lot of clusters, a lot of large stateful workloads. So upgrades have always been painful for us, and I'm looking forward to figuring out best ways forward.
All right, Dan.
Hey folks, can you hear me? I'm Dan Budrus. I'm at AWS working on ECAS. I've worked on ECAS Anywhere and the ECAS distribution and spent some time thinking about the Kubernetes support lifecycle and how Golang fits into that and things like that. So yeah, I'm interested to see how this group works and unfolds and see what I can offer as well.
All right, and then I think we've got Shimin left. All right, does anybody else want to unmute and say hello? All right, well, we'll let anybody else jump back in if they want to say hello, or you can drop info into the chat and we'll include it in the minutes just so that there as well.
I will say I'm frantically trying to type down what you said, so feel free to like go add or change or supplement. I missed a couple of people. I apologize.
That was really useful as you were adding those things in. I was keeping a list on paper, but then I noticed you were updating the docs, and that was super useful. Thanks, Jordan.
Yeah, even having this as a reference for like knowing people at different companies, different end users, different types of use cases. This is super useful. So this is one of the things I'm excited about this group for.
Yeah, it's really cool to see so many end users here. I think it really is great to see just so many people from different users of Kubernetes, contributors, and so many different folks interested in this topic. I think it's super cool. All right. So with that in mind, I thought it would be good to jump into the maybe discuss what the initial scope of work for the working group should be. What things do we want to tackle first? I think Vince has a coworker now. That's awesome. So in the charter, I'll link it here. I guess I can share too. We can kind of look through it as we're going. sure I'm on do not disturb. Okay, so we've got a pretty, I think, pretty wide scope for what the charter has in mind. As we went through this, there are certain things that are going to definitely be out of scope of this, and that's life cycle of projects outside of Kubernetes, designing and executing on changes that clearly fall into an individual SIG's responsibilities. That's really what SIGs are responsible for, and this is a working group, so there is no code that will come out of this working group. And then finally, technical and end user support. We may make recommendations around support, but we aren't here to provide direct support around any aspect. Since we don't own code, we don't have any specific paths of ownership. So that leaves a whole bunch of different things in scope. And I think the first bullet that's under here, collecting input to better define what long-term support looks like with regard to Kubernetes releases might be a good place to start. Totally open to anybody else's input there. Does anybody have anything that they think would be a good place to start with? We have some questions up here that we thought would be good to gather through some surveys. So in-use versions, I think there's always a shifting picture around that. There have been some efforts through prod readiness and some other things to kind of get an idea about what versions are being used, but I think it would be good to maybe start with that as a set of data to work from. And again, building on that, some constraints on deployment and upgrade patterns. We've got a lot of end users here. I think really good input on that. Noah, you have your hand up. Go ahead.
Yeah, I'm going to start by immediately throwing a wrench into things because I never got to comment on the issue. Never got around to making comments on this. I see one fundamental flaw in the very first part here, but it's the primary drum that I want to beat on, and that is the people that are focused on in this particular statement are people that are already running Kubernetes and not people who have already been excluded from running Kubernetes because of the existing LTS cycle. That's my primary influence that I want to bring to this, that there is representation that is not here because there are people who have been excluded by the existing release cycle.
Okay. Micah, you have your hand up as well.
Yeah, it might be good to, it's not everyone here might be as involved in the release cycle and schedule and understand sort of what the current release periods are like. So it might be good to just give an overview of like, why is there even a need for long-term release? I think a lot of people might have an idea, but maybe not everyone does. I think it's probably just worth stating that like Kubernetes has a 14-month basically maintenance period for each minor version. Mm-hmm. Minor versions have, are maintained for security or bugs or whatever by upstream. Vendors might have extended versions after that. But that's the primary release upstream. And then releases happen 3 times a year, minor versions of Kubernetes. So the cadence is typically for point releases is typically around once a month. And as Jordan called out at the beginning of the call, we now have all the maintained versions of Kubernetes on maintained versions of Go and plan to going forward. Go just released a blog post yesterday about backward compatibility as well. It's been a big topic in that community and partially at least driven by the needs of Kubernetes and large Go projects like Kubernetes. I don't know, Jordan or Jeremy or anyone else who wanted to add anything else, but that's kind of just the baseline of what we're working with as far as current support by the community. And so anything outside of that would be kind of in scope for this group.
I would call out 2 additional aspects in terms of upgrades and SKU. So there's 4 minor versions in support most of the time. There's 14-month window every 4 months. So there's a couple months after a new minor gets released that the oldest miner is still supported. During that time, nodes all the way back to the oldest version can still run against control planes on the newest version. So nodes aren't actually required to upgrade every 4 months. You can keep your nodes on a given miner version and just apply security fixes, patch releases, and keep them running against progressively newer control planes. So an annual upgrade cycle around nodes is actually already possible. Control planes currently have to upgrade every miner version. That can be done every 4 months if you want to stay on the latest, or it can be compressed to sort of upgrade through those rapidly. But they do have to hit every miner version currently. So those are two additional sort of pieces of information that inform what users and vendors currently have to do.
Yeah, I think that last part there, there's no ability to skip version upgrades, right? You have to go
for control planes.
Right,
yeah,
right.
For nodes, you can. You can take, you can take a node 3 versions back,
and bump it,
pipe it, bring it up on the current version. That's totally fine.
So in the documentation, it's n-2 is all its kubelets officially listed as supporting. So if it goes 4, that's cool, but
it's 3. It's n-3 as of today. Actually.
Okay.
That was something that we investigated and worked on during the 128 release cycle. So when the website gets updated for 128, as of 128, we support 3 node versions back. So it's the oldest node and the newest control plane as of 125, 128, which is awesome.
Well, I love you guys already. This is great.
We work really hard to do really boring things to make life a little bit easier.
I also want to just add one more thing about SRC responsibilities and what it means for end of life releases. Basically, for security.
SRC being the security committee.
Yeah, I was about to explain what SRC is. Security Response Committee does not cover end of life versions. So that is, again, something when you're running on end of life versions that does not cover any of the CVEs that are coming in.
Yeah, so just to expand on that, like the security committee accepts security reports for issues in Kubernetes or Kubernetes owned projects, but and we issue CVEs and work with owning teams on bug fixes. But if it's as of 124 now or older, we won't take any security reports on those versions.
Thanks for adding all the links in the chat, Bridget. Bridget's been, if you're not paying attention to the chat, Bridget's been adding links to almost everything we've been talking about as we've been going. So thank you.
I'll copy those into the notes as well.
Thanks, Jordan. Okay, so with that context in mind, does anybody have any questions that they would like to ask before we kind of dive in more in the little bit of time we have left to figure out what we want to do for next steps? All right. So in the charter, I think it'd be good exercise for anybody that hasn't read it yet to go take a look at that. We can do some of this asynchronously since time is not a great time slot for everybody. We have some things called out in the charter, as Noah mentioned. There is a thing not called out in the charter, people that can't use Kubernetes to begin with because of the current support policy. I don't know how we can survey those folks because I don't know we know who they are, but that would be a good perspective to gather, I think. But starting with the folks that are using Kubernetes, would gathering some of this data be a good first next step to better understand what we need to do or what opportunities there are to improve things for folks going forward?
I think I would like to understand how some of the changes that we've made over the past couple of years have moved the needle. I know we hear a lot about inability to upgrade or difficulty in upgrade or incompatibilities on upgrade. And we've actually made a lot of changes over the last couple of years. And so it would be helpful to hear from people who are having difficulty and whether they've kind of made it to the points where we made those improvements. We don't want to overtrain on the past. Like if there were problems that we had 2 years ago that we actually made changes for, we don't want to do a ton of work now to help people who maybe would already be helped by those improvements. But if people have made it to those versions and are still having difficulty, like that would be really good to know as well.
I think one that's we've already started to see like benefits of for our definitely our constituents, our customers are not enabling beta APIs by default. That can be removed. That's been the source of a lot of issues, whether it's PSP or RBAC or whatever different APIs that have been deprecated. Not enabling those by default is I think a really huge start. I think there was confidence, lost about, oh, Kubernetes just changes things, and not necessarily that that's true, but that's sort of the sentiment that I've heard of. Kubernetes doesn't care and changes things, pulls the rug out from people. So I think that's a great improvement that going forward will be really, really helpful in rebuilding that trust.
All right, Nick, go for it.
Okay, I'll try and keep this quick because we're almost done. The couple of things I'd recommend, a survey and stuff would be pretty useful. It was pretty useful last time, I think, but it'll take a little while to get that off the ground. If we want to get moving fast, I suggest starting a GDoc or something like that, where people who are attending the meeting can just drop some relevant data about what they're doing here, some of the things that we have in the charter. That's like a really good way to get very fast feedback and to have a central place to coordinate around. I think it's probably going to be useful maybe next meeting, maybe the meeting after, to spend a little bit of time talking about what we did previously and sort of, that will be a good source of some of the changes that were made previously. I mean, I think the stuff like the node skew, 14 months of support, that sort of stuff that came out of the previous round. But it'd be just good to go through a couple of those things. I guess those are my two suggestions. In Gateway API, we've had really good success with just making like a general GDoc available where people can dump things into. Works really well for async stuff.
Okay, it's a great suggestion. Thanks, Nick. There was a question in chat if it would be possible to get a list of the changes that have happened since the last time the working group happened. I think that would be useful to put into a single place just so folks can see everything. Like the change that's going to land today or be made public today with the SKU support. There's a lot of things changing that maybe end users aren't aware of. Kubernetes users in general may not be tracking all of these things because they're maybe not super glamorous new features, but they're super useful in terms of easing the burden. So I think that would be another good takeaway too, to make that available.
Yeah, I'm happy to take that as an AI. I can gather that, and anyone else who wants to add things that I'm not aware of, that's fine. I'll probably just toss it in the notes here and then we can hoist it into various things. If there are things that people aren't aware of, we can do like blog posts and like more public things. We've done some of that, but I'm always happy to signal boost things so people can be aware of them.
On that topic, something I've seen come up a few times is people get confused if they know they're at version, 1.21 or whatever, and they know that they shouldn't be, and they don't know exactly what will break for them if they go to 1.27, say. And when they start trying to figure it out, they see, okay, well, this API, okay, that might be a problem, or maybe it isn't. And I know that there's a lot of different efforts out there to kind of give people a way to programmatically introspect their cluster to figure out, hey, what are my actual risks if I am going to try to upgrade or change this cluster? And I know we're all thinking, launch a new cluster. Well, that's not realistic for many end users for many reasons. So I'm wondering if we want to kind of consider, instead of just giving people lists, giving them also some ability to tell if those lists apply to them.
And by apply to them, also use the software that they're using. Like that's the common theme I also hear is, oh, I'm calling it out specifically, but Istio or Prometheus or whatever, and I have to have for DNS, right? All these constellation of add-ons, and those sort of need to be coordinated, and there's these version SKUs, and sometimes it's not even open source stuff. Sometimes it's like proprietary stuff from telcos or other integrators. So yeah,
clearly an unbounded space, but
if every change had an associated, like, here's how you can tell if this is an issue for you, and there is some of that. Like there's metrics and audit ways to look at the audit log for an API and say like, oh, I can see that I actually have 5 applications using this API that's going to go away the next release. Like that's there. It's often left as an exercise for the cluster administrator to kind of take that information and do useful things with it.
And there's tools like Pluto, I think is one of them, that will do compatibility checking to check your cluster for things that are going to be deprecated. One of the big pushbacks that I get is people their dream is to skip control plane upgrades because we ship bundles to customers, that are for embedded offerings, so it gets complicated. Which I explain it all the time, but it's just the more compatibility checkers we can get that cover more of the APIs, the better life gets. So we can maybe explain away some of you have to include 3 versions in your bundle, but you can go 3 versions, right, in one kind of pass. So
one of the things that I have heard around from customers is certification. I don't know if that is being talked about. Regulated industries or gov industries, they go through, I upgrade and I have to test that everything works and it's certified, and sometimes they don't do it. They assign it to vendors. Now for every new version, they have to pay someone. So we talked about how quickly you can do 3 version upgrades annually, maybe for control plane, and go with it. But I don't know that process well to say that it's not a matter of going rapidly through 4 versions, but a matter of like paying for each particular version. So I don't know if that's talked about. I don't know the nuances of that use case, but if anyone knows more about it, I would love to hear.
That might be an area where the node level skip upgrades could be useful. It depends on what the certification needs to look like. If they're needing to certify the machines that the workloads are running on, then it's possible that the control plane is not touching their workloads, but the control plane could upgrade through what the machine that their programs are actually running on. They could certify 125, and then they could certify 128, and wouldn't need to do in between. Obviously, that could be applicable or not. Depends on what they need to certify.
For some of those, it is going to depend on individual jurisdictions, legality that might go in along with what certifications are required and where they are required. So for example, I'm here in Nevada. You all know what regulated industry I might be involved in.
Sand mining.
Yes, mining, totally mining. For some places, it depends on whether or not it was ever placed on a machine. And for some places, it depends on whether or not it touched a production workload. And that is dependent on your geography, state by state, region by region. It can be very complicated.
Yeah. Another aspect of skip-level upgrades that people don't talk about a lot is skip-level upgrades with downtime. So you can't operate control planes at more than 1 version of SKU actively, but the API server has to remain compatible with everything that was ever persisted to etcd. And so if you're in a cluster where it's actually okay to take your control plane offline, you can do a skip level upgrade that's offline. API server remains compatible with everything ever persisted to etcd. So if you're looking for ways to catch up, that is an option. People sort of assume you're going to keep it online and available all the time, but if your use case makes more sense and it's more important to you to catch up quickly, and you can take the control plane offline and do a skip, that will work.
Jordan, is that another way of saying that if you had a way to do an atomic update between any versions, that would work? That was sort of my reading of the version SKU document, because it talks a lot about HA clusters. But if you have a situation where it's just like one particular host and it's not an HA cluster,
if you have one host, it's all the control plane components, right. API server and scheduler and controller manager. Like the SKU between those is limited to one version. But if you're taking all of those offline, swapping them for all of them being on a new version, then that
is works. Supported.
Yeah.
Okay. Thanks.
So Jordan, does that take into account the you're jumping 3 versions, but in the in the second one, some things got deprecated, and in the third one they got removed, or have we managed the windows for deprecation and removal so that can't happen?
Well, sure. If you skip 3 versions, you're going to compress all the changes. But even when we deprecate and remove things, what the API server does with persisted data, like it's still, the API server can still read extensions v1 beta 1 data out of its ED and convert it and handle it. Like that hasn't been removed because we never got around to doing storage migrations. So the API server can read all persisted data as long as it's not alpha. If you're enabling alpha features, upgrades, or whatever, you're on your own. But for beta, like things that we actually promise compatibility for, API server can handle that persisted data all the way back. So it's the active SKU that's the problem.
Right. So yeah, I think that is definitely one that's good to call out, because I didn't know that either.
Now you hurt your rollback story. So like if you're going one version by one version by one version by one version, you can bring a new API server in, and then if it doesn't come healthy or whatever, you can take it out and start the old version back up, and everything is fine. If you bring 3 versions newer in, it can start writing stuff to etcd that the API server 3 versions back will choke on. So you hurt your rollback story. That's the main downside. Yeah.
So it sounds like we could probably use issuing some guidance around that sort of thing.
Yeah, I mean that's why we don't really point people at it and say
yeah,
you can do this. This is a good thing to do. Like if you're stuck 10 versions back and you're like, I've got vulnerabilities and I'm in a bad state, like maybe this would be a way to catch up, maybe. But yeah, there are definitely downsides to it.
And that downgrading is really only on a HA cluster is only single version, really, right? And that's not tested upstream at this point.
Downgrading single version,
if you or the rollback, like you said, on the control plane.
So we test all the data we persist to make sure it doesn't do bad things one version back. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So so that sort of roll the control plane up one version. I can potentially roll it back safely, only one, not 2.
Yeah, explicitly only one. Like after one version, the API server considers itself free to write things to etcd in a new version, stuff like that.
And that rollback. I guess that rollback is technically not tested, but the functionality that supports the rollback is tested of the control plane. The backward and forward compatibility between 2 versions of control planes. There's no test that upgrades a cluster control plane and then rolls it back, is my point.
I've lost
that I'm aware.
We've had them at various points. I don't know if we currently. It's tested at, I would say, unit and integration test levels. Yeah. Yeah. So in terms of work, documenting the current state, what is possible today with the caveats and downsides, I think it's useful to explain to people what is possible with appropriate like warnings. Like if you do this, you can't just start up a 3 version older API server and expect everything to be happy. Like if you do this, you need to have a strategy like an etcd backup, where your rollback consists of like put all the etcd data back the way it was and then start up the old one. Like there are things you can do that would make that possible or more reasonable, but there's a lot of sharp edges there. Documenting that so that it's clear what people can do, and then thinking about how we want to improve things. Like, do we want to make some of those sharp edges better, or are there other directions that we want to go? Like, understanding the current state of the people who are using us, documenting the current state of what will actually work today with all the caveats and stuff, and then thinking about how we want to improve. The frustrating thing about Skiplevel upgrades is, I would say probably half the time, nothing will have happened to change so that it actually would be fine. But that's a really terrible percentage, and it's pretty obscure. Like, understanding when something changed that would break it is really difficult to do. And so you'll find people who are like, oh yeah, we do Skiplevel upgrades, they work fine. It's like, well, they work fine so far, but you sort of got lucky. And that's difficult. We don't do anything to make it really clear, like, you're doing a thing that isn't going to work reliably.
Is there a
GitHub? I played Russian roulette with my foot 5 times and it didn't, and everything was fine.
Exactly. Exactly.
It's when you do the upgrades that have something like a Docker shim or a pod security policies that go away, right? That's where upgrades get difficult.
When different data gets persisted at etcd, or when you upgrade across a deprecation boundary, or like there are various things that we do out of an abundance of caution. Like when we relax validation or tighten validation, we want to be really careful. A new API server doesn't let data get persisted that would make an old API server lose its mind. And so like we roll that tightening or loosening out over multiple releases. And if you skipped those, you're at risk if someone wrote to the API in a way that made use of that looser or tighter validation. And so it's like you're at risk. Maybe you got lucky and maybe no one actually wrote data to the API that was problematic, but you got lucky. So like there's a variety of things that can put you at risk if you're doing Skiplevel upgrades, and it's not always obvious what the risk is.
For someone who doesn't know the depth of nuances of API machinery, are these things that you've just mentioned mentioned in a doc, I mean, in guidance or documentation? I know it is vaguely there that
like how we persist data to etcd is documented, like what you're allowed to do, how you tighten and loosen validation is documented, but it's more developer facing documentation. Like, here's the changes the API machinery developers are allowed to make. Right. It's not user facing. The goal is for users to not have to worry about this, right? We want to make changes in a way that you can just upgrade, and you never are put at risk.
Yeah. So the problem that happens with the customers I work with is that, oh, I know what you're saying me, but I don't understand what you're writing here, because API machinery, of course, right? How do we bridge the gap? Maybe if they knew it better, they could understand things differently, maybe ask for different things. They are right now saying us, let me go do skip version upgrade. Let me go through 3 versions at a time.
Yeah, today we just say it's not supported because we can't guarantee it's safe. Trying to explain all the nuances of how it could be safe.
Yeah, could be like those are different kind of documentation to bridge the gap. I think it's just us being in the middle who know a little bit of stuff, and the users who, well, I want to do this. So yeah.
So I think this is. Sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say, I think the risk we're running with saying, oh, we'll document the ways that you could do stuff that might not be 100%, is that you're going to have like a paragraph of you could do this, and then 10 paragraphs of, but here's all the things that could go wrong. And then, as Rita just said in the chat, then you have to keep that documentation up to date every time something that might be involved in that changes, which is going to be really hard.
And you get back to what Bridget was talking about, where we have docs, but then someone's like, I don't know, I have this cluster. I don't know what's in this cluster. Which of these 10 caveats apply to this cluster? Like, I have no idea. I agree with Bridget. Let's talk about how to track work.
Yeah. We are at time now, so we can maybe push through that real quick, and then we can give folks back the rest of their day. So I think we identified a couple of action items out of here. Jordan maybe will document, sorry, one second. Some of the things that have been done so far to improve the experience in the doc, so we can hoist that into another doc later on as one action item. We can determine if we want to do this documentation of how to do offline bumps and all the caveats that go along with that. Did we have any other major action items that we wanted to track, and then we can talk about how we want to track them?
I mentioned having a
Google Doc.
drop user data.
Yeah.
Google Doc somewhere. Yep.
Yeah. Sorry. Thanks, Nick.
I think we should document current state, at least for ourselves, to understand what's possible, even if we don't turn it into a website facing thing that we point users to do. Like, understand the current state and put things in place to sort of keep the abilities we already have and not lose those. So that might be testing or something like that.
Okay, cool. Do we want to create a GitHub project board to kind of see what the status of some of these things are? Okay, I'll take an action item to create one of those.
And if we want to go down the road of writing blog posts or anything, I volunteer my time to help with that kind of stuff. So that's
awesome. Thanks, Nick or Vince.
I'm also happy to help with blog posts, as well as Rita's point about the docs we have right now. We should probably make sure that we not just all of the corner cases nobody is going to recommend or support, but just the straight up docs that are supported tested cases. Rita pointed out the specific doc we should go check into.
Okay, that's a good action
happy
item
to
too.
help with that.
Do you want to take that one as a review? Okay.
Sure, absolutely.
I don't know if it's an action item, but I will try reaching out to some of the people who are not represented here to see if it's even reasonable to get them into this conversation.
Okay, thanks, Noah. Okay, so I will take an action to make a GitHub project board, and I'll create tracking items for these things, so we have some stuff for them. All right, we are at time now. Thanks everybody for joining. Anybody have anything they want to mention or say before we drop off? Otherwise, I think we can turn this into some async conversation until next time. All right, super exciting to see so many people here. I was not sure how many people would be here at this time, especially Nick. Thanks for joining us, Nick.
Anytime.
Yeah, have a great Wednesday, Nick.
Thank you. I'll see you all around.
All right,
bye
everybody.
Okay, thank you. Bye.